Brian Stelter's interview of Jenna Ellis, senior legal advisor for the Trump 2020 campaign, was probably among the worst interviews I've ever seen in my entire life. Viva Frei, Montreal litigator turned YouTuber, and I'm back in my home office.
Oh, I missed you bad.
For those of you who may not know, CNN's Brian Stelter recently interviewed Jenna Ellis, the senior legal advisor for the Trump 2020 presidential campaign. The ostensible purpose of the interview was to discuss a letter of demand that Jenna Ellis had just written to CNN for and on behalf of the Trump 2020 presidential campaign, demanding that CNN retract a poll that CNN published that the Trump 2020 presidential campaign determined to be frivolous and misleading. But whatever the initial purpose of the interview, it quickly degenerated into, you're going to see for yourself as we walk through this. This interview embodies and encapsulates bad law. You want to know what bad law looks like? Watch this interview. People bickering with each other, talking over each other, such that nothing of value comes out of it. The only difference is that this is not the practice of law. This was a reporter inviting on a guest only to talk over her and interrupt her repeatedly. I mean, Stelter couldn't even get 10 seconds into the interview before cutting off his guest and talking over her. It's something I've said in previous vlogs. It was the most important lesson I learned as a lawyer, and it was one of the most difficult lessons to learn because I find it very frustrating. As a lawyer, you have to sometimes just sit there and listen to what your adversary has to say, no matter how much it irritates you to listen to. You have to listen to them, you have to let them talk, you have to let them say things that are insulting, wrong, offensive, demeaning, degrading, etc., but you cannot interrupt them because that's not what lawyers do. At least that's not what good lawyers do. Good lawyers take notes, respond point by point once their adversary has finished speaking. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's just get into this debacle of an interview.
So what's the campaign strategy here? Is there a strategy? Joining me is Jenna Ellis. She's a senior legal advisor for the Trump campaign and attorney for President Trump. Jenna, there's your signature. We'll put it up on screen on the letter the other day. What's the legal claim that you believe you have against CNN regarding polling data?
So first things first, and maybe it's just me, but I find there to be something very aggressive and invasive about posting her signature front and center on national television. I appreciate that Jenna Ellis is a public figure, and I could probably find her signature if I went to Wikipedia, but I find there to be something aggressive about posting her signature for everyone to see. It's almost as though Stelter is saying to his viewers, it's not the content of this letter of demand that's important, it's her signature and you know what to do with it. Here it is, this is what it looks like. But perhaps that is just my hyperactive imagination. Let's get into the interview where Stelter cannot wait 10 seconds before interrupting his guest.
Look, no pollster in the world would stand behind this as a legitimate poll according to industry standards. So why would CNN
What
publish
industry
this?
standards?
8 seconds in, Jenna Ellis has not even finished one sentence before Brian Stelter interrupts her. Now, some of you might think that this is good interviewing. This is Brian Stelter keeping his guest honest. It isn't. It just makes the interview unwatchable. I need to know what Jenna has to say before I can listen to Brian Stelter say why he disagrees with it.
Why? For one reason.
This poll is in line with
Brian,
other
and that's
networks'
because they
polls.
want to
Pretty
undermine.
much every poll
and
shows
let me
Trump
finish.
losing
They
to
want
Biden.
to undermine.
The context for those of you who may not know it, CNN ran a poll showing that Biden had a 14% lead over Trump in a head-to-head battle. The Trump campaign took issue with the methodology behind that poll and sent a letter of demand demanding that CNN retract that poll. And here Stelter is saying that every poll shows Trump losing to Biden to support the CNN poll, without mentioning that every other poll showing Trump losing to Biden shows him losing by 8 or 9%, whereas the CNN poll has him losing by 14%. To which Jenna responds as follows.
Why are you putting so much emphasis on the H?
What are you talking about? I'm just saying it. Cool Whip.
Say whip.
Whip.
Now say cool whip.
Cool Whip. Cool Whip. Cool Whip.
That's not true. You polled adults, not registered voters, not likely voters, but just adults.
That's a normal polling procedure.
And that is not the industry standard. And so that's showing President Trump 14 points behind when a Zogby poll that was released June 11th that actually polled likely voters, not just adults, that you had the audacity to publish, showed President Trump 8 points ahead. In other polls, they're showing reasonably tied.
Here, Jenna is fleshing out her issues with the methodology behind that CNN poll, saying that they apparently polled adults, not even registered voters, and even less likely voters, in order to get those results. And there is some nuance to the point Jenna is making. As relates to the impugned poll, it was in fact based on polls of 1,259 adults. Only 1,125 of them were registered voters. So while it is true that the results of that poll were based on polling 1,259 adults, 1,125 of them were in fact registered voters, and if we believe what CNN says, they only poll likely voters around Labor Day. details and nuance that we don't get because Stelter keeps on interrupting her. Now, maybe she was never going to mention these facts and Stelter didn't have them at hand in order to counter what she was saying, but at least let her finish to see if she's not going to offer this information.
You're not putting out facts. You are putting out activism,
So
and
is this the
that's
strategy?
why you're fake news and
is
why
this
your
what you're going
ratings
to
are
do
so
between
bad.
now November 3rd? Anti-media strategy all the way to Election Day? What evidence do you have that attacking the media actually helps you?
What evidence do you have that attacking the media actually helps you? There is more of an admission of Stelter's frame of mind in that accusation than anything else. It's almost like a subconscious admission that the only reason Stelter does something is not because he believes in it, but because he thinks it will help him. I hear this accusation and I don't see an accusation, I see an admission of Brian Stelter's modus operandi.
Well, Brian, you're actually a defendant in a current lawsuit from the campaign against CNN for publishing false and defamatory statements couched in an opinion piece. And so this has
so
been
you're suing a couple of different
pattern
news outlets
for the last
for
3
publishing
years.
opinion.
Let me finish. Are you just going to interrupt me this whole time, or can we actually have a reasonable dialogue? This is why everyone calls you fake news, because you finally bring me on to actually talk about things, and then yet you just interrupt me and won't let me make my point. So my
your
point
comment
here
about
is that
polling
this
industry
poll
standards
is
is totally
science.
false, and it is important to interrupt when you
Not
share
true.
fake information.
No, you polled adults rather than registered
Perfectly
or likely
normal to poll
voters.
adults. It's
That's
important
not the
to know
industry
what
standard.
all adults
no, and
think
the only reason
about the president. That's actually really important. We should know what voters as well as
Brian, would you
non-voters know
publish
about
that?
the president.
It's important to know what adults think of the president, arguably in the context of a poll as to whether or not they're going to vote for them if those adults have no intention of voting. And the reality is that Stelter is not doing himself any favors here because he has better arguments in response to what Jenna is saying. As a good lawyer would do, he would be better served taking notes so that he can coherently respond to her when she finishes talking as opposed to constantly interrupting her.
It is only your poll that shows him 14 points behind, and the only reason for that is because you refuse to go along with the industry standards and poll actual likely voters or registered voters rather
Again,
than
not
just
true.
adults. And you
But what's
also
the-
only polled
not true, but what's the
25%
legal claim?
of Republicans
To
in
send
that
a
poll
threatening
rather
letter,
than... Don't you want to be correct? Don't you want to be correct and have
CNN and New York
accuracy,
Times
Brian?
and the Washington
You call
Post this
yourself
year.
a journalist. You call yourself a journalist, Brian, and it's your job to report the facts and then let the people decide. Your ratings are so bad and so in the tank because
Really?
America knows that CNN publishes activist agenda against President Trump
CNN is
rather
one of the
than just
highest rated
reporting the
channels on
facts.
cable.
Alright, it's humorous and it might make you feel good for saying it, but it's a gratuitous insult that has no place in the conversation. And it allows for Stelter's response that it is one of the highest rated channels on cable, but that's not saying much because there aren't that many national news networks out there. Apparently CNN is one of the top 3 leading cable news networks in the States. It's number 3, right behind MSNBC and Fox News. But whatever, it's a gratuitous insult. It might make you feel good, it might make for a good soundbite, it might even be true, but it is not useful for a productive discussion.
If you think the ratings are so low, which is untrue, it shouldn't matter, but it's untrue, why would you bother coming on?
This accusation actually comes off as some sort of deep psychological admission that Stelter actually only cares about the ratings and not speaking one's truth. In my mind, that he would implicitly accuse Jenna of placing greater value on ratings as opposed to speaking her truth is actually more of an indication of how he feels about himself and his own modus operandi. But what do I know? I'm just a lawyer and not a psychologist, although ask any lawyer and they will tell you 50% of the practice is in fact psychology.
If you think the ratings are so low, which is untrue, it shouldn't matter, but it's untrue, why would you bother coming on?
Because you asked me, and I think that it's important that your viewers, for the few that there are, that they get the facts and the truth.
Your viewers, for the few that there are, it may be funny, it may make you feel good, but it is not how I would engage with somebody in a public debate.
It is entertaining to watch, however, obviously.
And so I'm
CNN
always happy to
has one
come
of the
on, and
biggest
this president is
audiences
pushing back
on
and holding
cable in America.
and you know,
why is it that President Trump
can
and his
defend that,
aides
Brian,
care about
that's
ratings
fine.
at a time like this?
But I tell you what, Jenna struck a defensive chord in Brian Stelter, and here we go again with another pointing a finger at someone else, and there are 3 pointing right back at you. Why is it that President Trump and his aides care so much about the ratings? Stelter, by the looks of it, you are the only one who cares about the ratings. You look so defensive right now, it's beyond description.
And I'm saying that President Trump cares about facts and truth. And as a journalist, you should care about facts and truth. And to stand behind this poll is actually embarrassing for you. Because this poll is so completely egregious and outside the margins of industry standards that no legitimate pollster would
not
ever
true. So is
stand
the Trump
behind this
campaign
poll. Why
going
is
to
it
sue?
so completely different?
So is the Trump
than
campaign
others?
going to sue over a poll?
We have already sued you for false and defamatory statements. Again, you're a defendant
because you
in
don't
a
like an
case
opinion
that
piece
we've
that was
already
published.
brought. And so,
Right.
And for those of you who are paying attention, you are going to notice a very skillful pivot from the will you sue over the poll to discussing the defamation lawsuit that Donald Trump has taken against CNN for that article. Jenna came into this interview wanting to discuss this point. She found a way to segue into it, and she's discussing it, and it becomes very clear that Brian Stelter is in over his head.
no, it's not an opinion piece, Brian. I think as a journalist, you know the difference between an opinion statement and a factually false statement. So we have sued over a factually false statement that was couched in an opinion piece that claimed that the Trump campaign was going to again collude with Russia and keep that option on the table, quote unquote, keep that option on the table.
Lots of people have lots of opinions. That's one of the wonderful things about America. Lots of opinions. The Supreme Court has long said that a major purpose of the First Amendment is to protect the free discussion of government affairs, including discussions of candidates.
Of course it is.
The opinion articles that you're describing do exactly that. So why do you think you're right and the Supreme Court is wrong?
Statement. Do you know the difference, Brian? Do you know the difference between a factually false statement and an opinion statement?
I do. Is your goal really to loosen up the libel laws? President Trump's talked about wanting to do that.
So then,
is the real goal to loosen up the libel laws in America?
Why are you calling it an opinion statement? Why are
it's
you
an
calling
opinion
it
article. It was published on CNN's opinion website.
Now, I actually did a vlog breaking down this defamation lawsuit. If you haven't yet seen that vlog, I'm going to link it right here. Give it a watch. It's a good one. And in that vlog, I discussed these very issues, that CNN's defense is necessarily going to be that this was just an opinion piece published in our op-eds and therefore it cannot be defamatory. Jenna, who is clearly a very intelligent and capable attorney, is obviously going to argue that including statements of fact in opinion pieces can nonetheless be defamatory. And as a pure matter of law, she is in fact correct. Cloaking a statement of fact as a statement of opinion is not a protection against that being defamatory. That being said, the defense that someone was uttering a statement of opinion and not a statement of fact is a pretty broad defense, as we just saw in the Rachel Maddow lawsuit that was tossed out because it was concluded that Rachel Maddow was only spouting off matters of opinion and not matters of fact. Confirmed by the courts, Rachel Maddow publishes opinion and not fact.
Do you think it's okay to put a factually false statement inside of an opinion piece and couch it in an opinion piece when it is a factually provably false statement? Is that okay with you as a journalist?
I think it's really inappropriate for campaigns to sue news outlets in order to get publicity, in order to advance an anti-media agenda.
But do you agree with the general principle that you shouldn't, as a journalist, put a factually false statement in an opinion piece? That's not protected by the First Amendment. That's why we have libel laws and defamation laws. Would you agree with that?
Okay, so I'm not going to, let you flip the tables and let you interview me. I'm going to leave it to CNN's lawyers about that opinion piece.
That. You know, Brian, that is not protected by the First Amendment. That should be something so easy. I mean, didn't you learn that in media class, Brian? That should be something that we can all, regardless of whether. Did you learn that? Or is that something that's too complicated for you? You said you know the difference between a factually false statement and an opinion statement. So tell
what
me,
did you
is
learn
a factually false
in law
statement
school?
Okay to put out on your network?
Yeah. What did you learn in law school that makes you think this is a winning strategy? So that's the strategy, right? To make him look tough. To make him look tough while he lies to the public on Twitter.
So that's the strategy, to make him look tough, to lie. Again, I don't see an accusation. I see a deep psychological admission from Brian Stelter. To me, this comes off as pure projection, seeing in others what you feel to be true about yourself.
Seriously, that's the strategy, right? He went out there and he lied about that Buffalo Peace activist.
You said you're fine.
Yeah.
You said you're fine being held accountable.
The president the other day watched One American News. So why do you say he's about truth and facts when he's spreading lies about peace activists in Buffalo?
All about truth and facts.
He's not, Jenna, that's a waste. You're wasting my time, Jenna.
You're wasting my time, Jenna? You invited her on your show. I have a philosophy in life. You don't invite someone into your house to insult them. Yes, Jenna did not answer the question on that particular tweet. Yes, she avoided that question. Yes, she might have been evasive. Let her answer the question and let your viewers come to that conclusion instead of insulting her and interrupting her. You invited her on your show. You're probably going to have great ratings as a result of it. It takes a certain degree of audacity to accuse her of wasting your time.
He's not.
Brian,
Jenna,
you're the one who invited me.
The idea that the president cares about truth and facts.
Well, the legal claim is that we're trying to hold you accountable, and defamation.
That's not a legal claim.
Actually, last time I checked. Absolutely. Defamation is not a legal claim? Of course it is. And I know you didn't go to law school, but take it from the lawyer. It actually is a legal claim, and that's why we're suing you over the factually false statement. I know that you're not aware of this, but the very first step in how we conduct business is to first send a very nice letter to your general counsel asking for the retraction. We did that prior to actually having to file suit over the false and defamatory statements that were embedded in that opinion piece.
We've covered that. You've talked about that.
And that's how
like I said, that'll be litigated in court.
Again, Jenna is right. Depending on the jurisdiction, when it comes to defamation, sometimes you are required to put the other party on notice to retract the defamatory statements, failing which you cannot claim certain types of damages. Stuff we've discussed at length in previous vlogs. I'm going to link a playlist to defamation lawsuits right here. Give them a watch when you have, I don't know, an hour or two.
You can keep being patronizing. I don't mind, but I don't think it's a good look for you.
Now, I think we can all agree that Jenna was probably, in fact, being patronizing at least once or twice in the context of this interview, but that is the nature of the interview that Brian Stelter is conducting. He, too, was being aggressive, insulting, and patronizing. He cannot step back now and pretend to be the victim.
He called Comcast, a great American company, Comcast. He said people should drop them and go to a good provider. How is that not an abuse of the president's power as president, using his platform in that way?
Did Brian Stelter just refer to Comcast as a great American company? From everything I've read online, I think a great many people are right now going to conclude that CNN is in fact fake news.
First of all, Brian, again, I knew that you'd probably bring something like this up. We agreed prior to me coming on that we would stay to certain topics. And, you know, this is something, again, I'm happy to talk about anything, but this is, again, where the fake news...
Yeah, I told you I'm going to ask you about Trump and the media.
Questions, you know?
Yeah, Trump and the media. So do you think it's appropriate for the president to tell people what cable provider to... Okay, but he's a president, right? So here's what Norm Eisen said to me.
Do you like bad customer service?
Let's put on screen.
He's the president, but he's also an American citizen.
Agree or disagree with her answer, but at the very least, let her get it out uninterrupted so we can hear it and come to our own conclusions.
That is so far beyond the pale for American presidents. Right, but do you understand how aberrant that is in American history?
He has an opinion. No, he is the first one to actually use his platform as an American citizen to be able to call out the fake news media and say, because you are peddlers
you
of
understand
false
that, like, someday you're going to regret this, right?
You can keep being patronizing. I don't mind, but I don't think it's a good look for you.
Someday you're going to regret this when your kids and your grandkids look back at this time and you use slurs and smears like fake news to hurt news outlets. No, but it's Jenna.
And in my humble opinion, this is where Stelter just loses it. Whenever anyone resorts to this tactic of trying to shame you, they have lost the debate. After the entire interview, Brian Stelter then tells Jenna Ellis that she's going to regret this in 10 to 15 years. If you can't beat your adversary, at the very least try to shame them on national television. Just terrible high school level trying to shame your adversary instead of debating them on the substance. And in life, as on social media, whenever I hear these types of comments, I know the discussion is really effectively over.
You're not trying to do your job. You're not a journalist, Brian. You're an activist. That's the problem. You have an agenda, and your agenda is anti-Trump. The American people see through that, and they are very grateful that this president is finally holding the fake news media accountable, because you're activists. You're not reporting fact and truth. You won't even say that as a general
the reason why I think it's helpful to have these conversations
shouldn't ever appear in a media outlet.
Folks have gotten used to this alternative realities, and I think it's important we see there are alternative realities.
And the end of this interview just illustrates why it was a disingenuous interview from the very beginning. This is just a monologue talking over his guest to try to show why he is so morally righteous to the rest of the world. The reason I think it's helpful to have these conversations while he proceeds to talk all over her in a self-righteous monologue, that about sums up this interview.
That as a
the reason why I think it's helpful to have these conversations, folks have gotten used to this alternative realities, and I think it's important we see there are alternative realities.
And my prediction, the Trump campaign is not suing over this poll, but they did manage to get the issue in the spotlight even with CNN viewers. I hope you liked my breakdown. If you did, be sure to like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell, drop a comment in the comment section below and let me know what you think. If you want to support the channel, all of these support links are in the pinned comment, but above all else, take care of yourselves and now you know your vlog. Peace out. Booyah!